So the next bill is House File 31, which is the federal tax conformity bill that we heard in taxes yesterday and is now we're ready to hear today. And so Representative Gomez, once you're settled, would you like to move your bill, which would be you would be sending House File 31 to be re-referred to the General Register?
Yes, please, Chair Olson.
Wonderful. And you also have an amendment.
I do.
Should we move the amendment to get it in the shape that you would like?
Yes, please.
And so you'd be moving the A1 amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. So the A1 is in front of us. And is there also a technical fix to the A1 that we should move at this point to?
There is. I would like to offer a verbal amendment if I could.
Representative Gomez, would you please share your verbal amendment to the A1?
Yes, so I would like to move that on page 2 of the A1 amendment, line 13, that we delete everything after December 31st, 2023, and also on page 2 that we delete line 14. As you can see, it's sort of kind of a partial sentence there, so just a little technical fix.
Okay, thank you. And I will have Mr. Sullivan repeat that too so that we all hear that correctly and if there's any clarification we need.
Madam Chair and members, Representative Gomez moves to amend the H0031A1 amendment as follows. On page 2, line 13, delete everything after December 31st, 2023. And page 2, delete line 14.
Any questions to the oral amendment? Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if nonpartisan research, what is the substantive change of what we're doing?
Great.
Yeah,
Representative Gomez.
Or I could just answer that. It's pretty easy, actually, and it's based on some conversation that we had in the Taxes Committee yesterday and a request from some of the GOP members part of when you do tax conformity, and we haven't done it in a few years, is that it impacts previous tax years. So I think this impacts starting in 18? Yeah, so 18, 19, 20, 21. So some people will have to file amended returns to align with those changes that we hopefully will sign into law. So our original version of it allowed for a window of 6 months for those amended returns to be filed. And so we're changing it to allow those amendments to be filed until December 31st, 2023. So it just kind of gives people a few more months to get that done. And then there's like, so that's the piece that we just touched, which starts on like 212. And then the previous, if you have questions about anything before that, you're going to have to ask the experts, because I don't know what any of it really means, but it's all just kind of technical stuff up until that substantive change on 212.
All right. Representative Kresha to the oral amendment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And no disrespect to the author, but that's why I directed my comments to the nonpartisan research. So I'd like to start there. So if I could go back and re-ask my question, could nonpartisan please give me the substantive change?
Sure. So whoever would make sense from, would it be Colby, would be Mr. Sullivan, could you please address Representative Kresha's question?
Madam Chair and Representative Kresha, my understanding is that the oral amendment just fixes a technical drafting error in the A1 amendment. I'm looking at my colleague, Mr. Klayman, and he could just nod or step down and confirm that that's the case.
Welcome, Mr. Klayman. If you could please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Chris Klayman. I'm with the House Research Department. I staff the tax area there. The oral amendment removes language that is just completely nonsensical. It would, if it was engrossed into the underlying bill, it would create a half sentence, kind of a sentence to nowhere, that wouldn't make any sense on page of the underlying bill. If you want to know what it would look like if it was engrossed on page 23, line 7 of the underlying bill, you'd be adding that quoted language on line 2.13 and 2.14 of the underlying A1 or of the A1 amendment. And the language is the commissioner has 1 year from the date for filing returns in paragraph A2, and you'd just be sticking that on to the end of line 23.17 in the underlying bill, the HF, the first engrossment, House File 31. So that just wouldn't make any sense, and that's just a total drafting error on the amendment. So it's not intended to do anything. I can testify more to the details of that if anyone would like, but that's just doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't be part of the underlying bill.
Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the clarification. I think that, I'm glad we're making them, and I think it just speaks to the fact that we have a bit of a hasty process here, and we're designed to slow down and get this right. And so I hope that we use this as a opportunity. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion to the oral amendment to the A1? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the oral amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The motion prevails and the oral amendment to the A1 is adopted. So to the A1 as amended, Representative Gomez.
Well, Madam Chair, since I misunderstood Representative Kresha's question, I think I sort of explained the A1 amendment generally already. Really just changes that period of time that filers have to file the amended returns from 6 months after the bill enactment to the end of the year.
Any discussion to the A1 as amended? Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had been aware of the discussion that CPAs had concerns with the 6-month time period and whether or not that was long enough and some of the other concerns. And so I had a amendment drafted before I saw your A1, so I appreciate that. So I won't be offering it because it's pretty much taken care of here. I had gone from 6 months to 12 months, and you've gone just about that level. The only other thing that I had added to the amendment was the ability to file electronically, and I think that's still something considerable, something to consider in your bill, because I think that makes it easier for both the department as well as filers if they can do it electronically rather than having to do it paper-wise. And so I'm hoping that we can still get that corrected sometime. But at this point, I'm not offering my amendment because you've already taken care of it. But I like the bill. I think it does a lot to get conformity done early in the session. I know CPAs will like it earlier than later, so thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Any further discussion to the A1 as amended? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The motion prevails and the A1 amendment as amended is adopted. So to the bill, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Olson and committee members. So as we all know, this is the early federal tax conformity bill. My appreciation to Chair Olson for bringing us together earlier than maybe some of us had anticipated so that we can hear and move this bill forward. So just briefly, in Minnesota, we use federal AGI as a starting point for our tax filing. We sort of align our Minnesota tax code is aligned in a lot of ways with the Internal Revenue Code. But when Congress passes changes to the Internal Revenue Code in Minnesota, we don't automatically align with them. Instead, we selectively conform to changes that make sense for the residents of our state. So since the last time we did conformity in 2019, a lot has happened at the federal government, or the federal level, actually, that impacts the Internal Revenue Code. So this bill includes provisions from 7 different federal acts, including, which some of the issues that are of high interest to folks are, it aligns with the tax treatment for student loans from ARPA and some of the COVID-era supports, especially that were there to help the hospitality industry during the height of the pandemic, so that, if you got a shuttered venue grant or loan, or you got a restaurant revitalization support, that we don't treat that, we want to not treat that as income in Minnesota. We want that to be exempt from taxes. So those are sort of some of the things that I've heard the most about, and our fiscal staff's going to walk us through kind of some of the specifics. So yesterday, the reason, to Representative Kresha's point, right, this is happening quickly, and the reason yesterday in our tax committee, Commissioner Paul Marquardt, who's joined us, I'm not going to get tired of saying Commissioner Marquardt, he told us that if we can get these changes enacted by January 13th, the Department of Revenue will be able to implement them in time for the 2022 tax filing season, eliminating the need for future amended returns. and making kind of our tax code, one of our goals in the tax space is to make filing easy, to make it legible, to make it like not, as non-confusing as possible. So this sort of aligns with those goals. Just want to say that our staff in the House has really worked diligently in this effort over the holiday season. I'm really thankful to them. They've been working really hard. They're all behind me here. And also, so I just want to extend my gratitude to them and to our partners at the Department of Revenue and in the Senate, or everybody's kind of been, and in the governor's office, we've all been kind of moving forward on this together. Representative Davids has also been a great partner on this effort, and he's a co-author on the bill. Thanks to him, we passed this unanimously out of taxes yesterday. The Senate bill also has bipartisan authorship and passed unanimously out of Senate taxes this morning. I've gotten a bunch of requests for GOP members to be added as authors, and I'm hopeful that we can get this done. It's a way to make our tax code simpler, easier for individuals and businesses in our state. And it's a good thing for us to do together, and I hope to earn your support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. So we have one of our fiscal staff who is going to go over the fiscal parts. That's typically what we do here, so we're glad to have you here. So welcome to the committee, Ms. Templin. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Templin, and I am with the Nonpartisan House Fiscal Analysis Department. And for today's hearing on House File 31, I have two fiscal documents should be in your packet. A spreadsheet for House File 31 and a revenue estimate from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. And it has been requested that I provide a quick overview of the revenue estimate first before I go into the spreadsheet. So I will do that. So the revenue estimate looks like this. Just quickly, on the revenue estimate, I just want to go over a couple of areas, kind of the background on why we have revenue estimates and how the revenue estimate is structured. The purpose of a revenue estimate is to provide fiscal estimates of proposed changes to tax laws. Within the House Fiscal Analysis Department and within the House Research Department, we are able to provide unofficial estimates for proposals. However, estimates from the Tax Research Division of the Minnesota Department of Revenue are deemed to be official revenue analysis of proposed tax laws. So House fiscal staff rely on these official revenue estimates from the Department of Revenue to track the cost of tax law proposals. So that's the background on a revenue estimate. How the revenue estimate is structured. There are 4 sections in a revenue estimate. There's the fund impact, the current law section. There's a section on the proposed changes to tax laws. And then there's a 4th section that discusses the revenue analysis detail. I thought I would just talk about 2 of those sections. The first one being the fund impact. In the revenue estimate, the fund impact shows the revenue impact of changes to tax laws relative to current law. The revenue impact reflects the estimated cost of changes to a tax proposal over a 4-year budget window. It's the 4-year budget window that is tracked in the MMB economic forecast, fiscal 24 to fiscal 27. In the fund impact in the revenue estimate, compared to a fiscal note prepared by the LBO, the revenue estimate does not show the fiscal impact of any proposed operational changes to state agencies. In other words, there's no administrative cost in the revenue estimate. And for House File 31, there are no administrative costs tracked in the tracking sheet for federal conformity. And then finally, a couple of technical notes about, for reading revenue estimates. Fiscal estimates are in thousands, and positive fiscal estimates denote a provision raises revenue. Fiscal estimates that are in parentheses or negative estimates denote that the provision reduces revenue. And the fund section also shows the fund affected. And for House File 31, the general fund is the only fund that is affected. And then finally, the revenue analysis detail section in the estimate, that is an important section in that document. It describes the methodology used to calculate the estimate by the Department of Revenue. It includes detail about the data sources used for the estimate, economic assumptions, and if any adjustments have been made to the estimate, such as adjustments for calendar and fiscal year splits. So the fiscal analyst, we use these estimates, we review these estimates before or prior to a hearing to make sure they align with the kind of the intent of the bill. And I guess I'll move away from the revenue estimate now and now move to the spreadsheet to walk through House File 31, if you're ready. Okay, if there are no questions. Okay. So the spreadsheet, in the upper right-hand corner, it should say 4:01 p.m., House File 31. Like the revenue estimate, the tracking sheet shows changes, general fund tax revenue changes relative to current law. And then I think for just at a high level, I wanted to point out the total estimated general fund revenue impact of House File 31. You can see that on line 5 and line 105. Column D shows in fiscal 24-25, the estimated revenue reduction for House File 31 is $99.7 million. And in fiscal 26 and 27, as shown in column G, the estimated general fund revenue reduction is $3.170 million. The rest of the spreadsheet shows details for House File 31 and how they impact the two tax types affected, individual income tax and corporate tax. I will note that in the individual income tax section, that it affects both individual income taxpayers and sole proprietors and I just lost my train. And S corporations, thank you, and partnerships. And I think, unless you want to go into additional detail line by line, I will just stop at that.
All right, thank you, Ms. Templin. So I think that's good for now, and we'll go to questions and see if member questions. So Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill, Representative Gomez or Chair Gomez. I am curious, and I know we don't concentrate here a lot in the House on what the other body does, but just wondering where they're at with this bill. Is the language going to line up? Where are we at with that? Thank you.
Representative Gomez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Olson and Representative Scott. So in tax committee yesterday, we had like 2 DE amendments, an amendment to the second DE. So they heard, the Senate Tax Committee met this morning at 8:30. They heard do you call it the engrossed language? They heard the final language that passed out of the House Tax Committee yesterday afternoon. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, it did pass unanimously out of that committee. So I think that we will have to, what we just amended onto this, that date change and sort of a few of these technical tweaks, we will have to amend onto the language that they just passed this morning. But we're doing pretty good. We're in pretty close alignment right now. Thank you.
Representative Scott, anything further? Further discussion to the Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Gomez, thank you for bringing this bill forward. It's greatly appreciated. While I'm sure that sometime during this session we will have disagreements on some items, and I'm shocked to hear that. It is a good sign that this bill is being progressed forward. There's lots of areas where we do have agreement on items, and I'm glad to see that conformity is one of them going forward. I would also encourage DFL chairs and the Ways and Means Chair, Chair Olson. There are other spending items. There's other items that I think we can reach agreement on. It doesn't mean we're going to reach agreement on everything, but I do think we have an opportunity to work together and show Minnesotans that we can govern together and make some decisions in agreement. And so I hope, Representative Gomez, that you don't lose any street cred with me praising you publicly in your caucus. No offense is intended. If I need to attack you on the House floor, just let me know and we'll take care of that. But I would encourage members to vote yes. And again, thank the DFL leadership, Chair Olson and Representative Gomez, for allowing this to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garofalo. Seeing no further discussion, would you like to renew your motion that House File 31 as amended be referred to the General Register?
Yes, please.
With the motion in front of us, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The motion prevails and your bill is on its way to the General Register. So thank you, Representative Gomez.